Well, thank you for having me and Jan for putting on this event. As Masoud said, my name is Chimene Bonhomme and I'm from Microsoft. Just to give a bit of background into that hell of an introduction, essentially what I do is I'm a technical advisor for big data, machine learning and AI. And a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis is essentially helping different businesses and also individuals how they can learn more about what it is in this space, and also about how they can use the latest tools and technologies and services that are freely available, and also some that you have to pay for right now that are in the industry at the moment. What I do as well day to day is also I do a lot of proof of concepts and proof of value situations. So as you can imagine, it's a highly stressful situation where I have to code in a lot of languages and do a lot of very bespoke, customized applications in machine learning and AI. Not just on a small scale, but also at a big data scale. We're talking about terabytes and petabytes, not just on premise, but in the clouds, and how we can bring AI into that premise. So what I'd like to do is just to give a bit of an introduction with a nice, good, warm feeling video, just to set the scene a bit.
In the 16 years that I've been teaching, I've never not wanted to get up and go to work. Education needs to be for everybody, and the majority of our planet doesn't have the resources that this new technological world requires.
Excel is a tool that teachers have used forever in the math and science classroom, and it always has represented stagnant data or past data. But now we're starting to get into live data. And live data is where it's at with middle school kids, because it's that instantaneous, ooh, you know, you pump on that salad spinner, wow, that's what it's doing right now. So they can get that feedback, and that really, really empowers them in the design process and their iterations as they develop what they're making and making it better. Take your little seismograph and shake it, and you see the actual seismogram being generated on the screen. And it's just that sweet spot right now. It's just where they learn, and it's exciting for them.
Everything that was created was like made from paper plates and plastic cups and a few little wires and some magnets.
I'm starting to get into this mindset where I can take these lower cost materials and have projects that are every bit as impacting, but a fraction of the cost.
I wanted students to understand technology to the point where they would have some voice in how it moves forward, that it's not pushing them around, that they can do something with it and make something of it and not just be subject to it. We try to make sure that every unit has the analog component and then the digital piece. And that way we can provide that option for teachers to keep it simple or go on a deep dive if that's what they prefer.
I think that there's kind of a fear of the unknown with this stuff. Really, all we need the teachers to do is the same thing we're asking our kids to do. Get in there and dig in and mess around with it. And you know, if you mess around with it long enough, then you're gonna get it. And that's where I was. I taught math and science for 14 years, and our school didn't have any type of technology program. And so I was just like, hey, something's got to happen.
This is not a sales pitch.
First period has now started.
Okay. Well, I'll bring us back into PowerPoint after that. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is AI in education. Masoud recommended that I talk to you about this topic today, just to see where things are at in the industry today and how different it is to where we are in the past. So a couple of things that I want to show you is some nice little hacks you can do as a student from AI applications that are already available to you that I wish I had when I was doing uni for 9 years, and also a lot of AI school programs that you can easily take advantage of, like if you wanted to go into robotics, if you wanted to do cognitive processing. There are a lot of programs and a lot of services that are really readily available to you that you can take advantage of it, that are also free for you to play with. So I was talking earlier during drinks about how has this space changed? At least since when I was in uni, in high school and primary school, even to when Jan was in high school and primary school. I'm not calling you out. you named it first. And we were talking about, back in our day, we actually had to hand in hard copies. We did floppy disks. I didn't even have PowerPoint when I was in high school. And now we're looking at, well, what are we looking at today? So we have all this data that's available to us. We've got all these tools, and we have a lot of students. The classroom estate now is so different to what it was, at least back when I was in school with the chalkboard, handing things in on floppy disks. And what I wanted to talk to you about is how can we get all that information and not just do a data dump on it, but get the insights from it and use that to talk back to the student and find out how they can get the most of their experience in the education system, whether if they're just starting school for the first time, if they're learning how to speak, all the way until tertiary education, even up until when you're an adult and you're thinking about getting into this space. Is where do you start? How do you learn? Because each of us processes information differently. We all learn differently. And it's about understanding what works for us. And the sooner that we find out what works for us, that we can actually take advantage of these technologies a lot easier and make the most out of them. So, as I was saying, our journey is powered by data. We do have a lot of data. And whether or not we're collecting it, we have this opportunity to make the most out of it from data collection. There are different ways that we can do that. I know we talk a lot today about IoT devices, the Internet of Things, and we all want to jump onto our Raspberry Pi, and we all want to be interconnected with our devices, and also be more connected with our lecturers and our peers. That goes beyond just from emailing them at 3 a.m. as I used to do. So, what does the data journey look like today? Well, we do have data, hard copies, and we can translate them. We can do optical character recognition, OCR, to get those old records and put them into a digital context, and then do some analysis on that to do a sort of like a graph analysis of how information has moved and how also our understanding of different contexts has changed over time. And then we want to think about, well, how do we display information? And this is usually the part where most people get stuck. Do we want to go to Excel? No, we do not. No, we're not doing DAX, we're not doing Power Query or M. We love Excel, it's so extensible, but we don't always want to go there because it is not scalable. And some of the formulas, some of the formulas that we want to do are just too complex for DAX to handle. As much as I love DAX, it just can't do it sometimes. And then once we get the display, if we're using any particular reporting tool such as Power BI, if we're using our own bespoke API tool, we're coding in D3.js to create our own dashboards and applications and embedding them into our own mobile devices or our own websites. We want to think, well, now we've predicted the past, we can see what's happened, what's going to happen next? And how can we make any insights out of that? So then we want to think, how can we make predictions? And a lot of people, where they get stuck is, what on earth do we want to predict? And this is where the blocking point is. It's like, we've got all this information, but what do we want to do with it? And the first question I say is like, how do you want to help yourself? But most importantly, how do you want to help the people around you? And that's usually a strong emotional point for particularly not just a lot of teachers when it comes exam times, when students are handing things in, they have to put up a wall when the students are crying. But it's also for the students where they're thinking, have I done enough? Will I get through? And if what I haven't done is enough, how will I get through during the next cycle? So it's creating something where you can drive an outcome out of that information. And that's where a lot of ML and AI come into place. So this is where it comes from data to decisions and therefore into actions. So we've talked about how we go from descriptive and diagnostic data insights, and we want to now talk about how we can go more into the predictive and prescriptive space. Now, what that looks like from an IT perspective is that we have migrated really quickly in the past decade at least, from innovations from we've got cloud. Now we have our IoT devices. Now people don't think we're weird talking on the phone anymore. From even our Bluetooth devices, now we're even on the edge. And now we have AI. And it's thinking, with these breakthrough intelligence capabilities, how can we leverage that in our education system? So one of the ways that I like to talk to people about is like, you have all these forms of communication, you have all these individual users, you have all these platforms. How can we integrate them all together first to at least collect data before we can drive any insights? And that's where we have this idea of a graph interface. It's pulling all those services together, all those individuals, and all their intricacies, what makes them them, and also the people around them, and find what are the barriers in this. Why isn't this person progressing as 98% of the rest of the class? What's holding them back? Is there something else going on? And that's when we can start extracting information out of all these different layers using this graph to understand the student at a more intimate level. Some people might think that there might be a big ethical breach in this, but you also think, well, we've gone to this point in technology where we also have end-to-end encryption. We have single sign-on authentication that can actually lock these things down. So everything that the banks and the government has tried to do in terms of security is now seeping its way in through the education sector, so we can have our own security and make sure that we're not having that breach of our privacy as well. So if we look at what AI capabilities are readily available that you can actually try out now, I'll show you on the web, you can try out for yourselves. We have different capabilities. These are pre-built APIs, so for vision. So imagine if you can't see very well or you cannot see at all. Our vision APIs can help you determine what objects are happening. It can even determine moving objects around you. And if you're sitting in a group and you don't know what the interaction level is around, but you can feel the energy, you can ask a headwear device and say, what is the interaction level in the group? And it will say, everyone's happy, they're smiling, or this person is a 23-year-old with brown hair, they're smiling, this person's grimacing, and this person is cringing. So they probably cracked a joke. And this technology is readily available, it already exists. In terms of speech, now, we have a lot of technology going around about speech to text, text to speech, custom speech. How do we recognize different accents like mine, or something that might be more ochre, say from Greymouth? I'm just putting it out there. I've never heard anything from Greymouth. They just sounded funny. I'm not even sure I'm saying it right. Greymouth or Greymouth? Greymouth. Oh, Jesus. Oh, this is being recorded. This will be interesting transcription. But then we think, well, speech is great if you can talk and you can hear, but what if you're deaf? And then we come up, what if we've got sign language APIs? So you put that vision, speech, language together, and then you think, what if there's a student that's living in the outback that can't hear? You would have a teacher interacting with that student through sign language, and they would have that recorded, and they would have that transcribed for them, so it wouldn't always be in Braille as well. So there are a lot of different options available to you. It's the same with knowledge and search. If you have a Q&A set of questions that are quite common for students who are considering signing up to a particular course and they're not sure, it can automatically interact with a Q&A bot, for example, and just give them that flexibility as well for the business to say, all right, if these common Q&A pairs do not answer the question immediately for the student, I can direct them to a living being, and they can take the transcript of that that conversation history and keep going from there. So nothing is lost. And it's the same with search. If you're looking for something, you can think, is there any key terms, some key figures inside that text that I can use? Are there common search patterns that I'm seeing within my education community that I can leverage upon? So there are a lot of options available. I probably should have gone to this slide first. So as we can see, what is in the image or video? So currently at Microsoft, we do have a headwear device. I should have brought it so I could compete with you in your arm. That you can actually wear, and it will say, what is the category? Well, we've got 5 people in this image, and there are 5 faces. Now, this API already exists, by the way, and we can see, is it adults, is it children? So you can determine what level of language can I use in this situation if you're blind. And then you think, what are the dominant colors? And in this case, we can tell we're in a corporate environment because everyone's wearing navy and grey. And it'll also tell you the accent colours. In this case, it doesn't, just because it's a flat photo. But you can imagine if you start throwing up a lot of images into an algorithm, you can start training it to recognise a lot of different variances and just some simple intricacies in different images as well. So the way we can integrate students' school and all that assessment data is through that graph interface is we take the information from the individual and also from their university, I'm going to say Outlook email, or any groups that they might be in if they're in any groups outside of their classroom that they might be a part of. OneNote, if they've got it, any Teams platform that they might have to talk to each other anytime they're doing any group assessments. And also, from an ethics point of view, how they do a single sign-on, how do we make sure that their data is secure as well throughout that entire process. So it looks at grabbing all that information into your application, no matter which one it may be, and securing it in that way. Thank you, PowerPoint. So for building a platform for personalised learning, you have different canvases that you can choose from what type of document interface you want to use, as well as a conversation interface to the Pages interface. And that can be looked at to embedded canvases as well. So if you can imagine, if you were to use Office Services, just an example, sales hat on, if you look at Office 365, all of those applications are integrated with your own ID, and it's locked down to your user, and the only person that would know it is the person that authored it to you. So, and by grabbing that information to make sure to learn about how you're using it, gives an insight to at least your lecturer and the education system how you're using those tools, if at all. I know some people go to uni, they like to just booze out, and there are some people that go to uni and just sleep the whole time, and some people that go to uni to actually study. Which one are you? This will tell us, because we will be able to figure out how much focus time you've actually spent on these devices, actually looking up the materials on the interweb of the university. So it's a really cool way of going about it. Really creepy, but cool. Student performance, how are you doing? How much do you need to pass based on your current effort, emphasis on effort. So there are different ways you can do about it. As I said, there are a lot of different services that you can use to understand it. So once we've got the information coming in, we now think, okay, what can we do to actually understand it? So we want to put all this data in a structured, non-structured database, for example. And then we want to do some data engineering from it, do some feature engineering, clean it up a little, and then do some machine learning algorithms on a very DevOps pipeline. And from there, we can then derive the insights by putting the cleansed data into storage and pushing that out to the business user with a few rules embedded on top of it so that no one else is writing up their own fantasy, making up their own lies. So usually this is a classic way of, it's very high level, but a classic way of trying to derive insights into student performance. So if I were to give one example, who is at greater risk of failing and who is at greater risk of, and failing, it could not just be academically, it's also who is not socializing well, who needs to be held back because they're not getting well with the other students in the class, or who is at greater risk of not just grasping the concepts of a certain course, for example, and might be better off taking a different career choice. So one way we can look at it is if we bucket this into different areas and we think, all right, let's compare these two students and where do they lie on the graph. Now this is great if this was a two-student scenario. And if we were to go further, we can still determine who's a better student and who needs more work where. But we actually need to bring that out to the wider classroom and then some. And then you think, oh boy, what am I going to do now? Who do I help? And that's where you need to do further analytics on top of that to think, what can I do with this information now that I've bucketed all these categories and I can see from a very high level who's out and who will be fine on their own but still needs a pat on the back, but there's someone that needs a little bit more help, and you think, who are those students? And that's where we can do further analytics on top of that, whichever way it may be, or also give those students more tools that might be available to them, which I will show you shortly, that could actually help accelerate their learning process or their socialization with other students as well. So just a quick international example, and I'll give a local one, is there was one school in the US that actually used a reporting tool called Power BI and also Azure Machine Learning Services to actually understand the students' performance and who will fail, and also the early predicators of student performance. So this is very similar to something that I'm currently doing in New Zealand at the moment with another tertiary provider, thou shalt not be named, who are trying to find out the student lifetime journey. So what they're trying to do is build out an end-to-end recommendation system from day one. So what they're doing is they're building a student classifier for any students that we're thinking of coming in or looking at certain courses, and building out a program recommendation system just for that student. So it takes the student course advisor to that next level. It adds that analytics on top of that, and by doing that, what the tertiary education provider is trying to do is increase the rate of a student wanting to complete the subject, but also complete it well. And in a way that actually would have a higher chance of them getting a job once they've got their degree. Because more often than not, I know in my medical degree, which I did for 6 years, a lot of us finished, some shouldn't have, but they didn't get a job afterwards. It was probably a blessing in disguise. But if a student does it right, we want to guarantee them the best chance of success once they've got their degree. So what this looks like is real-time machine learning recommendations to students using a variety of different platforms, which I cannot really tell you about. But essentially they're using this particular one called Azure Databricks, which is a unified analytics platform for data engineers and data scientists, and also any subject matter experts to do a CI/CD pipeline on the student journey and for end-to-end production. And they can do that now in real time, and also push those results out through APIs. So you can imagine once they build this out over time, what kind of impact that might have on the student, but also what learnings that might give for the education provider, the sort of feedback that they would get from those outputs. So I'll just jump out of this, and I'll show you some. Am I over time? You're looking at me like, stop talking, woman. Stop talking. You're doing the thing. I'm sorry. If you don't like what I have to say, just. Okay. So during the start, I mentioned that if you wanted to get started in robotics or any cognitive services learning, there's a free tool that you can use, free loading. It's called AI School. If you typed in Microsoft AI School, you will find it immediately. It will be the first one to pop up. So there's currently a robot challenge going on right now, if anyone wanted to try that. But there's also a lot of other AI learning materials. So if I were to go to AI services, you can see there are a different lot of learning paths. So if you wanted to do natural language processing using apps, you can do that. If you wanted to do optical character recognition, so taking handwriting and putting it into text, for example, that's something that you can also try out. And also image classification. That one is easy. Hence it said beginner. I was going to say it was easy, but that's fine. The other one is with the free APIs that I was mentioning. If you wanted to try any of these, like for example, there's this speech one. If you want to try out your accent and see if it can translate it into text, this is always fun. So speech to text, So this is a very generic API. It doesn't work on my accent because, you know, I go to town on it, but you can create your own custom speech API from this. So if you wanted to try some of these tools and see where you can go with it, it's a very easy and free way to start. But I'll stop talking now. Sorry, Masoud.